paving, $160,000.
Controversial.
When was that estimate made, and how do we get a new estimate, or if we can't, what happens to the extra money?
Well, to give you the full story, David's proposal was $250,000,
Just under 250.
with supported by paper estimates from 3 vendors or 4 in the fall, to complete the paving of the Valley Road and to pave March Hill with grinding and a little building up of an apron. And that's about $240,000. Some of the selectmen wouldn't support that in the belief that A, we couldn't afford it, and B, we're of the habit of spending $140,000 a year on paving. The voters will decide what that number is when we have a schedule that we go around the town. All he knows we're 21 years behind on your road, I think. And this is why, because paving, the cost of paving increases faster than our willingness to pay for it. And so the schedule that David maintains is, I think, an honorable one, but we can't afford to keep it. So we're just pecking away at some unit of money that you will decide. Now,
the budget committee does not agree with the select board on that, and is asking that that warrant article go back up to $250,000.
there you go.
So how does that get resolved? This is what's going for the front of the next meeting in February. The AABC differs, and I know they differ significantly on this particular.
They're an advisory committee, so they're just going to advise us.
Well, it's just my question. I'm just trying to get procedure. And that was presented to the board yesterday. Right? The difference, I think, was presented yesterday.
We've known about the dispute for a good long time.
Well, my point being is, how does that get resolved? Does the AABC record, and I'm not saying which.
I'll tell you.
How does that get resolved?
The warrant that we sign off on, that will have some number in it, that 2 of the 3 of us will agree on. I have no idea what that number will be. When the mallet goes down at 10 o'clock on that Saturday morning, it's your number. So if you don't like that number, you stand up and you say, I'd like to amend Article 10 to read $240,000. And then it's strictly a majority vote of the people in the room.
All right, let me ask the question this way. I understand that process. Has the select board taken into consideration the recommendations of the AABC, not on this one particular article, but on the whole budget as presented by them?
This selectman has.
I would like to speak to that as the chair, acting chair of the ABC.
Well, the reason I say that is I know there's been a ton of work done by that group. Okay, valid or not or whatever, which is ultimately decided by the selectmen, and we didn't, and it was agreed in the selectmen's meetings that we were not, like we did last year, have 2 different proposals going in front of the voters, to have one proposal. So if the AABC is a real entity, if the select board is requesting their input get put into the budget, how can not the select board in its entirety consider their recommendations before this is put in front of the voters? What I see then is if there's a difference of opinion between the AABC and the select board, let's take this item for example, they're going to have to, somebody's going to have to stand up and say, hey, I disagree.
Yep.
I think you need to understand the chronology here, that time has been an issue for all of us. And the budget committee has really only had a chance to review the warrant article suggestions which have come from Joel, not the entire select board, okay, and have made suggestions on those which have been passed back to Joel and the rest of the select board. Okay, as far as the budget goes, the numbers that you're looking at today, now, were finished this morning, and the budget committee has not officially seen those because we have not met since those numbers were put together. So the people that have been made involved in that.
Carol, in February, the voters are going to be asked, or whoever attends that meeting in the deliberative session in February, are going to see this.
I fully understand that.
And all of the work of the AABC is futile.
No, that's not true.
Yeah,
There's a chance. We're not going to have done all this work and have it go down the toilet, okay? You know me better than that. The question that we have for the select board is when they're mailing the recommendations going out and saying, you know, we recommend this and what their vote is, are they going to include, as they did last year, the input from the budget committee? And I think that's something that comes into play.
Yeah, but you're gonna have, there's a number that's gonna be put out. Let's just take this one article. It's gonna go out at $160,000 plus X coming from taxation. And if the AABC doesn't agree with that, they're gonna have to on here say, we disagree with this proposal.
I understand that.
Yeah,
No, they're not gonna say that.
it can happen one of two ways, and first of all, thank you, Joel, for putting all these together, because Joel did, early on in the process, put them together. And there were articles that were on here, that Rock and I that we could not support even being on it. And they're no longer here, so we have had input. Rock and I have been involved in this process. I think it's fair to say that he and I just didn't have much to offer. You know, didn't have anything to add, so Joel's kind of handled it. As far as whether the AABC is mentioned on the ballot, we haven't even discussed that yet. But I assume we will, right?
We will discuss it.
We will discuss
I
it.
will advocate for it, but it's not.
And lastly, the AABC is an advisory board, and we have taken a whole lot of advice from you guys in a whole lot of different areas. That isn't to say that we are gonna act as their rubber stamp, or they're gonna act as our rubber stamp, or anything like that.
But,
We're gonna have disagreement.
right, but the input that they had on this particular article this morning, since this was only finished,
Article 2.
this morning, okay, isn't even in consideration here unless you, as a group, have already met and said, nope, we don't want to go with their proposal, their recommendation, and that's perfectly okay. We're going with what Joel had on the paper originally.
Well, what we do is we come out of this meeting with the recommendations that have come from this group. The people that took the time to show up here. And we talked about this. There's gonna be continued conversations about this before this is finalized, Article 2, and goes before you guys again, February 6th, down to school for the deliberative session. So we're not done.
The ABC information is not public. So this group that's sitting here tonight doesn't have the ability to weigh recommendation from them and recommendation from you to be able to say, hey, we have a.
They're not elected, they're an advisory.
No, I
I think
understand.
that's a moot
So
point.
they advise,
Yeah,
they're advising the selectmen on what you feel is the best, and it's our decision as to what to put in front of the people.
That doesn't answer what Bob's saying. In terms of what you're half right and you're half wrong, okay? You haven't had a chance to hear what the AABC has to say, because we haven't had the time to put something together to say it yet, in terms of Article 2. Okay, that will come, and whether or not the select board wants to support us including our input in their mailing or their propaganda, or whatever you want to call it, their literature.
They're not gonna do that.
It will get out from the AABC.
They're not gonna do that, because they're gonna be going against the
Whatever. Hey,
petition.
we haven't had time to try to compromise with them yet, Bob, either, so the whole thing is,
Look, if you're
involved.
satisfied with it, because I don't know work you for.
Oh, I didn't say I was, but it's involved.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take turns now. Priscilla,
So,
and then Bob.
I'm Priscilla, and I'm also on the budget committee. And we actually, in the spring of this year, came up with a calendar for the budget process in terms of how we wanted to do things ahead of time, so that we would indeed have time for discussion with the select board on particular items. And that calendar was just
Well,
completely
that's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate.
So that is a problem, but I think Bob raises another interesting question, which is it the role of the budget committee to advise only the select board, or do we also advise the town?
Board, I understand, right? Just the board. And that's the way it's set up to be.
Just a minute, John. Bobby?
Well, this is my personal opinion. I know they've worked really hard, and I admire all the work they put in. Through the years, I've worked on different committees, and did this year too. Put in a lot of time on some committees, and in a whole year, and it was just advising the selectmen. And there were times, and I have to say, that next year I said, I don't wanna be on that committee, he didn't take my advice. The point is, I had a right to get up once a year as a citizen and say, I was on this committee, and this is what we came to. But they are only advising the selectmen, and it is up to the selectmen to present what they feel best. And they have their own reasons, and that will come out. But I think trying to say, well, look at whatever committee, this is what we should be looking at everything. The fact is, we still have another meeting, that information can come out. If you sat on that committee and said, hey, this is what we came up to.
And last year, the deliberative session, we did, as a committee, we amended one of the articles. And so,
One of them, is that legal?
that's what I'm asking, is that legal?
That's my
If
question.
somebody else did it, they might.
I don't think it was illegal because it was one person standing up, saying he represented some group and making a proposal on Article 2.
Yeah.
If they're revising dollar amounts, it's legal. If they're changing the subject matter, it's not legal.
Yeah.
But they were,
And I
simply changing dollar amount is part of the function of the legislative body, which is the deliberative session, and they were part of that.
So the short of it is that all committee members are citizens. Many citizens are committee members, but any citizen can stand up and amend any article on February 6th. And if it passes by a simple majority, and we do have the opportunity to have a secret ballot, the mechanism is in place. It's a simple wish expressed by 5 people. Yeah.
5 signatures.
I think your rights are well protected, and your opportunity, unless the moderator and I completely booker up the meeting in February, I think your opportunity to have every single spot on that avenue heard and discussed in that gymnasium with lunch is there for you. That's the democratic piece that I like. The part that I don't like is the SB2 part that says the people who actually vote in March don't get to have that discussion. That's another topic. I think we're in good shape. I don't want to stifle any input from any committee or any citizen or any combination thereof. It's customary, although it's required, that the selectmen will bundle in their letter to the voters the recommendations of other committees who wish to have a say on Article 10 or Article 6 or Article 2. We're not bound to do that, but I think we should do that. We'll see if this particular select board agrees. I predict that we will. Remember, the selectmen have to look at these things also through a lens that says, and part of my concern with Article 10 is, we really want to do some paving. And our fear is if we make the number too big, we won't do any paving. And that's just trying to predict the future based on our experience. It's not good science and it's not good government, but it's what we've got.
David, has paving costs come down?
Paving cost has come down, and that's what I've been trying to get in here.
That's what I figured.
Every one of these paving companies I have numbers from is a budget number. Because they can't tell me what, it will not be higher, but it will guarantee it will be lower than the number they gave me on paper now.
Good information.
But, so, where does that, say I can save $30,000 off that paving number? Where does that money disappear to? Does it just stay?
It goes up on Byron's
Well, that's what I'm saying. If we raise X amount of dollars,
That's a good way.
and it only cost me $200,000 over there, I want it to be flexible on the warrant article to put that paving somewhere else if there's any left over. Instead of go back to the general fund.
That's a great discussion, and it's one that we ought to have in February with everybody in the room that's going to vote.
That's why I'm saying it now.
Because
I'm gonna
the
say
way
it now.
that warrant article is written now, if he's got money left over, he's not spending it.
That's right.
Okay? And it's part of my job to make sure we understand that so we make an informed decision. So it's in our interest as a community, if we want to spend all the money we decided to raise on that kind of paving activity, it's in our interest as a community to write that warrant article a little more, less explicitly, to say, Valley Road, March Hill Road, and other
Maybe
spots
go
as
some-
available.
Yeah.
But in every case, warrant article numbers are not to exceed numbers. So if the paving goes up beyond what we thought would do 2.8 miles, we're not doing 2.8 miles and sending you the bill. We're spending to the limit of the warrant article and not a nickel more. Nor are we moving money out of Article 2 to supplement expenses in a warrant article that we didn't budget wisely. That's just flat out against the law. Bobby?
Well, I thought that Susan said we can't change the wording though in February of a warrant article, right?
No, but the selectmen can, which is why we have this hearing.
Can't change the subject matter.
Between now and then.
So the selectmen have the authority between now and then to add other paving
Okay, that's what I
as
was
assigned, and I
wondering.
think we should. I think that's why this hearing is important. Just a minute. John, you had something a half an hour ago and I ignored you.
Oh, no, first of all, I was answering a question, but two things.
Well, don't answer.
AAB's, the budget committee, the advantage they will have in the deliberative session is that they will have talked about all this stuff. They understand it thoroughly, and they'll be in a position to argue on behalf of their proposal, which makes sense. So they will actually have a stronger position, people that come to the deliberative session, than the rest of us. So we just, I could throw out a number, but it wouldn't mean anything. But the committee can give reasons. So I think they're in a fair and strong position to be able to defend their proposal. So I think the system ought to work pretty well. The other thing I'm fairly disconnected from what goes on in the town, but one of the things I have as a hobby is the energy efficiency thing, and I'm just wondering if there's enough money in the general maintenance to do maybe $4,000 or $5,000 worth, or should we up the number, or do we care? We've been thinking about several buildings and things that we could do, small things, very simple, $1,000 here, a few $100 there. I just spent $50 on the library, as an experiment. That's not very much, but in other words, like, that, you heard that fan running for quite a while. That fan is taking air out of this room, out into the doors here, and it's sucking air in through the doors and driving it into the fire station, and then it goes out of the fire, it gets heated, sent into the fire station, and out the doors of the fire station. That's because of design issues, that need to be corrected. So there's a lot of things that can be done with these buildings that, are not expensive, that could, anyway, I just wanted to know whether, if there isn't room for a few thousand.
We're pretty close to our statutory threshold for what we can propose, but there's no limit to what citizens can propose in February. And then it's, all those in favor?
We can add to the,
Article 2.
Sorry.
Nothing to be sorry about. That's the small D in democracy right there.
There's still about 10,000 that you can add to get to the 3% if that had to happen. But I think that the line item of 15,000 wasn't about 10 of that, but the buildings and maintenance, some of that stuff was stuff that John was proposing that we talked about.
Yeah.
In terms of prioritizing, it wasn't a report.
And as we get closer, we do have a fellow who's done a survey of what we consider our major building projects, the highway and this building and the town offices. And we may actually have a firm number from him in time to use it in an intelligent way in February. If we don't, we'll go back to what we've always done, which is to guess. Other questions about warrant articles?
This isn't about a warrant article, but last week I was at the budget meeting on Wednesday, and the budget committee worked very hard comparing what the selectmen wanted and trying to keep taxes pretty level. And when they were done, their proposal was to raise taxes $42,000. And getting back to Bob's project on the road, they had wanted to put in the whole $250 and the whole $250 coming from fund balance. If I added correctly, the warrant articles from the selectmen to be raised by taxes would be $170,000. So the budget committee is working hard to keep things level. I don't know if the selectmen have a different plan. I know some of this will be revised, but there is a big difference between the two of them right now.
And that's our strength, I think, when we disagree.
It won't be revised, because that's going to the public.
Correct.
I just, This is, I think where philosophies separate, and this is where I think good discussion comes from. Do we do the things that we want to do out of money that has already been taken out of your pocket? Or when we want to do things, do we have to pay up for them when we want to do them?
Well, I would like to see a little bit more taken out of fund balance,
Since you've already,
being that
It's already
there's
been
this
taken out of your
difference when they were talking about 42,000 and they still were going to pay the whole road out of fund balance and the selectmen at 170 to break for taxation.
If I
I
can
think
make,
we were both proposing to take the exact same amount out of fund balance,
Pretty darn close, yeah.
$486,000. What we were proposing in terms of an overall budget, including the warrant articles and Article 2 and all the other warrant articles, was less because we were spending less overall. The appropriations were lower than what we were proposing.
Right,
And-
the operating budget in particular, we assumed would be the same as last year.
if I can make a quick comment, right now, I lobbied to not put much money into capital reserve funds, mainly because we are so far behind on buying equipment. You're basically gonna put the money in and take it right back out. That's where we're at right now. I also lobbied that we need to put money into infrastructure in the town. Things like roads and bridges and the buildings, to keep the maintenance up on the buildings. I said the other day, you gotta prioritize your equipment too. You know, you need an ambulance, you need a fire truck, and I hate to pick on you, David, but if one of the dump trucks broke down, so what? We still would survive, we would, redo the trucks and how they do the roads and stuff like that. But the biggest problem is if you get behind on your paving and all the infrastructure, you're gonna be running into big problems. I've been working with Ackworth, and they are so far behind.
There's no
Their roads
stars.
have actually gotten to the point they've deteriorated, now they're rebuilding them. And they're spending millions of dollars now to rebuild their roads because they said, well, we'll just spend a little bit on them. We should have been spending around $170,000 a year on paving. We've been spending $130,000 a year. You're falling behind. And then you're gonna pay for it down the road. You will. Guarantee it.
I think they're turning some of their tar roads back to dirt, aren't they, because they found it was easier to care for?
No, they haven't gotten to that point yet.
They tried on Berry Hill, but there was one person who turned it back from what I heard.
Yeah, I don't really wanna get into politics of Ackworth right now, but the biggest thing is that you really need to take care of your infrastructure. If you don't, it falls apart, and then what do you have? A lot of nice trucks, and you're pounding over dirt, back roads. Because that's what they will all turn into, is back roads. Just take a drive up Berry Hill.
No, don't.
Oh, come on.
Keeps the traffic down, Flatlanders away though.
Are there other
Take
warrant
the
articles of
flat
interest
ones.
or other line items in the budget you'd like to discuss this evening at 5 minutes of 9?
At the last meeting, you said that you were going to put in, with the, take out that Alstead Festival and put in a dollar amount for the, high school.
did we not do that?
And it wasn't done.
Kelly will make a note of that.
What page are you on?
Bobby,
I'm on
15.
page 15. Okay.
Put a circle around it, I've got the different communications. Donna, you had something?
Yeah, about the road paving thing. I think it was you, Joel, who when I first moved here, said that it's way more expensive to pave the road than to not pave it, but once it's paved, it's way easier to maintain it.
The state believes that it's cheaper to maintain a paved road than a dirt road. They believe that regardless of what the cost of paving has been.
So that once a road is paved, it behooves the town to maintain it as a paved road.
Correct.
And maintain it correctly so that they don't have to rebuild the whole bloody thing.
Like
all over
March Hill
again.
Road. March Hill Road's a great example of neglect.
1996.
And we have a paving schedule that we are either 8 or 12 years behind, depending on where you put the thumbtack. And that is a conscious choice of the voters. We have a version of this discussion every year. David's responsibly advocating for us spending more money than we really want to in order to honor that schedule that we, in the planning session, agreed that was appropriate, but we're not doing it. And I predict that we won't probably do it this year, but we might get closer than we are right now. And that's the advocacy piece that anybody in the room has. Other items of interest. The moderatrix would like to speak in advocacy for something. I forget what, so long ago.
We have a primary coming up. I'm looking for people who are willing to be vote counters. Many of you have already signed up and acknowledged my email, and thank you very much, Mike Newman and others.